Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Booth, and on behalf of the South Fulton Coalition, we'd like to thank you for your participation in this town hall. This town hall is for State Representative for District 61, and I want to quickly tell you about the mission of the South Fulton Coalition. Our mission is to implement action programs such as town halls for the continued improvement, accountability, and integrity of the City of South Fulton and its elected officials. Both candidates for this runoff were invited. However, one had a previous engagement. And as you can see, Rashawn Kemp is here tonight, and we're going to pretty much give this town hall to him since he's the only one that showed up. For this town hall, we have the following ground rules. The candidate will have 5 minutes for opening remarks. However, since we only have one candidate, we're completely flexible. So take as much time as you want, Mr. Kemp, in your opening remarks, and also responding to questions. You're only limited by our hour-and-a-half town hall. Questions will be directed from the residents. If you have a question, just raise your electronic hand using the reactions feature. We intentionally muted everyone, so we'll take you off mute after you raise your hand. So don't worry about that part. Just make sure that once we ask you to unmute, that you go ahead and unmute yourself. Please be respectful to the moderator, which is myself, and the co-moderator, Mr. Richard Snellings, and also Ms. Marcia Steele will be helping us as well. And also be completely respectful to the candidate. This is your only warning. We will exit you out of the room for any disruptive or perverse comments. Let's have a great meeting. And so let's get started. And if you're ready, Mr. Kemp, why don't you go ahead and start with your opening remarks?
Well, first off, thank you, Ron, and thank you to the South Fulton Coalition and Richard and your team for putting this together. It is definitely commendable to see all of the forums that you all have hosted throughout this election season. They have been informative, they've been helpful, and we need more dialogue like this in our society, in our communities. Unfortunately, that dialogue is not going to include the other candidate in this race. As you can see, we have an empty chair because Roger Bruce has decided not to show up. I understand everyone can have other prior commitments, but schedules can be changed when something important as a forum is requested and given in enough notice. So I just want to thank you all so much. And I thank everyone that's on here tonight for coming in and joining this town hall. My name is Rashawn Kemp, and I am excited and honored to be here as a candidate to be the next state representative in House District 61. I was raised in Columbus, Ohio by my great grandmother, Mary Holloman, who lived to be a blessed 99 years old, and I know is with me today and every day throughout this race and throughout all of the triumphs and challenges that I face. My great grandmother stressed to me the importance of education. And I have been privileged to hold some really impactful roles in my career. And I am now trying to hold another impactful role in my career, and that's one of service. That's one in which I serve as a state legislator to represent House District 61. I have been in Atlanta for over a decade and in the community of right off of Butner and Tail. My community is actually zoned in Atlanta, but I get, I guess, to live the best of both worlds, shop, live, and eat in South Fulton, and get to go to Douglas County and also, directly here in Atlanta. I have been a high school dropout prevention high school principal and also a teacher. And then finally, I've been active in my community as an NPU chair. For those who are not in Atlanta, that is just a community organization that represents multiple community associations in the city of Atlanta. Not just, I should correct that. It's a really important role that was started by Maynard Jackson to really impact and influence from a community perspective what happens at the city level. And so I was honored and privileged to serve as vice chair and then chair of my NPU. I am currently, most recently led a nonprofit organization that supports Black-led public charter schools across the country. And I look forward to having more conversation about that. But I'm also honored, she may have dropped off, but my mom joined me from all the way from Ohio. I was excited to see her on here as well and see some other friendly faces, but I am just privileged and honored to be here with you all. I decided to run because as a Black man, I saw what was happening in 2020 and 2021 with Black men. And I really decided, what is ultimately my role? What can I do more to serve my community? There's my mom. She just popped on. Hey there, mom. But I was having a conversation with my husband, and at the time we, said, well, there's an incumbent in the race. I was thinking I shouldn't do it, but his response to me was, why are you letting someone else dictate what the contribution you can make to our community? And so here I am. I'm excited that out of 4 people, it is me and one other person now asking to have your vote. On June 21st, actually starting this Saturday in Atlanta, and then starting on Monday in Douglas County and going through next Friday. But I'm just privileged and honored to be here. I truly believe that there is so much more that we can be having in this seat right now. I mean, it's just so, clear. Could not be a more clear representation to have an empty seat next to me. But one of my former opponents, who I'm just so privileged and honored to have her endorsement, just getting to know her through this race, is Monique McCoy, who's here on this call with us as well. And she said it best, that we have a representative, but we don't have representation, because we all know we can expect more from our representatives and our elected officials versus someone who, in response to issues like a hospital leaving our community, says, well, that's not my responsibility, or that, my only responsibility is to pass a state budget. Yes, by law, that is true, but there's more we should expect from our elected officials. And I hope to be that elected official that shows up, speaks out, and delivers for our community. So with that, I'll be quiet and hopefully get some questions from folks in the community, and we'll have a good dialogue.
Well, thank you for those opening remarks, Mr. Kemp. I'm going to ask Rashard to go ahead and ask the first question. There's one in the chat right now. And if you do have a question, please raise your electronic hand. This is your opportunity to ask the candidate that may be your state representative any question that you want. So Rashard, you want to ask that first question?
Absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging me. Mr. Kemp, can you explain exactly what your role is as the House representative for District 61?
Yeah, that's a good question. I see that BK asked that question. That is my daughter's initial. So BK, you have a good name. My daughter is Brooklyn Kemp. The role of a representative is to, one, represent the people down at the Capitol, to do the people's business as it relates to the state level business. And so you are one of 180 elected officials across the state to represent your community, your House district, and their interests, but also the interests of the state. And so it's to pass state policy that impacts all walks of our life, whether it be what happens on our roads from Campbellton Road to Camp Creek, whether it be what happens in our classrooms, from Westlake to Rise Charter School, whether it be what happens in hospitals, in our healthcare. Those are all decisions that happen at the state level. And it is our responsibility to come together every year for 40 days. That's how long the legislative session is. Our legislature is considered a part-time legislature, and we meet, but during the time that we're not in session, it's working in the community. It's engaging our constituents and ensuring that when we do get into the legislative session, we are prepared to represent the interests of our community. And it's also, in my opinion, to be an advocate. The incumbent, rightfully said that, by law, the legislature is required to pass the state budget. That's true, but also they're required to pass laws and policies that impact the daily lives of our citizens. And in order to do that, I believe you have to be willing to show up to community forums. You have to be willing to show up in the community. And I believe that ultimately what our community wants, and what I've heard so often, is a legislator that shows up and knocks doors and engages in a grassroots fashion. And that's something that I've been able to do throughout my career. And also having been privileged to work down at the Capitol in my role as a government government affairs official with education. And so I've been able to work hand in hand with elected officials, with representatives and senators to shepherd bills and making sure that they're getting passed, and also to getting funding for other bills that we got passed in the legislature.
Okay, well, if no one else has a question, oh yeah, Whitney, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. She has the next question. Once you unmute yourself, Whitney, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kemp. This is Whitney Kenner Jones, and I just want to say thank you, first of all, for being here and giving us an opportunity to ask you questions directly. I think that speaks, volumes for what you would bring to the district. But as someone who has run against an incumbent, and I understand the position that you are in, do you think you will do a better job than Mr. Bruce? And if so, why?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, Whitney. Whitney and I were out waving and engaging voters when they were going to vote, and both our moms are out there. And it definitely, I definitely think a lot of the votes we got were as a result of that. So yeah, Whitney, you asked a very important question, and that's a question, honestly, that I asked before I even announced that I was running. And I definitely believe I can do a better job than the incumbent. One, because I'm not a career politician. I am someone that has, lived, worked, experience recently. I do believe that our current elected official there's a disconnect. I do believe that my experience as an educator is so critically important, especially now post-pandemic. I have the experience not only in leading and producing results that is necessary, I believe, to be an effective leader, having led a national nonprofit organization and raised over $900,000 in my first year doing that, having turned around a failing high school, and also having been engaged in my community. I believe all of those experiences are so critically important to be an effective legislator. And I have built relationships down at the Capitol, Whitney, that I think are important across the aisle, because in Georgia, you're going to have to be able to work across the aisle to get things done. Ideally, yes, we would have a huge flip in the makeup of our legislature, but we know that is very unlikely to happen, especially this year, considering the political environment. But I absolutely believe that I will deliver for our community. It's not just important to sit on what the incumbent says. I sit on important committees if you're not actually delivering and bringing results to our community. And I believe as the next representative, I will do that.
Okay, Rashard, you have the next question. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. So we saw on social media that there was some questions regarding a political organization called ALEC, as well as the Balduzzi Group. Can you briefly explain what your affiliation is with both of those organizations?
Yes. Okay. Rashard, bringing the hard questions, but thank you for asking that. There have been, one individual asking this question. And one thing I want to say, I am very willing to have a dialogue with anyone. What I don't want to get into is a back and forth banner on social media. And so I actually asked that individual to join this forum tonight so that we can have a conversation about this. First, with the Balduzzi Group. The Balduzzi Group is actually a progressive communications firm that works to get progressives and Democratic leaders elected. My connection with them is they actually put together my first mailer. That mailer had a picture of me and my grandmother on that. And the only conversation we had was me telling them about my fondest memory of my great grandmother Graham, and that was her taking me to vote with her. And back in the day, this was when you would actually go behind a curtain and you literally like pull levers. And literally the last time, the last time that she was able to vote, I was able to take her. And she was able to vote for a woman president. And so they put together that message, and they were paid for that. Ultimately, I did not know this. They also do IE, which is independent expenditures. And for those that are not in the political world, that means that organizations can do things outside of what a campaign does in support of a candidate. And they did that, apparently. They had no communication with me. I actually only found out that they did that by this individual posting it on social media. What they tried to do, and which was incorrect, is to tie it to a conservative organization. And the reason I believe they did that is because of my support for public charter schools. Public charter schools is something that actually our 44th president supported, Barack Obama. It is something that I fundamentally believe in because I believe that it unlocks the power of self-determination in our communities, especially Black communities. There are so many high quality Black led and founded public charter schools in our communities. And I will die on that sword. I believe that that is a tool in the toolbox that is so critical to our public education system. There are conservative organizations that support public charter schools. That's no question about that. I don't have any affiliation with ALEC, but there are organizations that support all breadths of different things. And I think that just speaks to my ability to work across the aisle and work with people that I fundamentally disagree with on every other issue except for that of empowering a parent to be able to send their child to the school that best fits them. And I am a perfect example of that. My son graduated from KIPP Atlanta Collegiate High School. Originally, he was actually at Grady High School when we lived in Midtown. And I pulled him out because I felt like we knew that he needed a smaller environment. He needed an environment in which his culture was celebrated. And my son walked away, graduated with over $500,000 in scholarship offers and has a full ride scholarship to Tennessee State University as a result of the education he received. And I do not believe that I, as a community member or I, as an elected official, should tell a parent where they should or shouldn't send their child to.
Thank you for that response. And there are 2 questions in the chat from Christian. You want to go ahead and ask them, Rashard?
So Kristen says that she is aware of multiple illegal bills sponsored by your opponent. What is your opinion on this, and will you respect legal rights if you are elected?
Absolutely. This is a very good question. I found it very interesting that my opponent tried to attack me and say that I am trying to make the mayor of South Fulton super powerful when actually, in fact, he, through legislation, interfered in city business. So that is not something that I will entertain as a legislator. I do believe that he did that in retaliation. I do not. That's just not my style. I am not someone that is going to be divisive or bring legislation for my political allies to hurt my political foes or my perceived foes. And so I will absolutely respect the sovereignty of cities, but I do believe that it's important for us to bring our constituents and the voters to the table and engage them in the process to ensure that our cities are run effectively. And I do believe that there is a balance to be struck there, but I do not support those bills that he put forth. One, to get rid of the contracted attorney that the city was using and things like that. I think that was done in retaliation to support his political ally.
Okay, Rashard, you have the next 2 questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, you mentioned retaliation, which is the crux of our next question. Will you work to eliminate retaliation and decisiveness between the local state delegations and local elected officials?
Yes, I think that with any elected office, there is a certain bully pit and a certain responsibility that is inherent in those roles. And so I see my responsibility as a legislator to be a convener. That is somebody I've been all my life. I had to do that in order to turn around the high school that I turned around. I had to do that in Ohio when I led a state education agency department, and we're implementing some of the most reformative laws in the state to impact actually charter schools that many in the charter school community were not in agreement with because they were so restrictive, but necessary in order to turn that industry around. And, you know, I had to bring everyone to the table in order to have conversation, in order to find where we can agree, understanding that there are going to be opportunities for us to agree to disagree, but we can do it in a way in which we are not attacking each other and being so divisive. That is not what our constituents and our community wants. That is how I've run my campaign. I have tried to stay above all of the, you know, negative things that happen on social media, the negative things that are said. That is just not my nature. I am someone that brings people together. I like how Mayor Andre Dickens says, you know, I like to draw circles, not lines, and that is 100% my personality.
How much? And then for the next question, what is your position on school resource officers in the public school setting?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I think my position has actually evolved on this. I definitely see the concern in our communities as it relates to resource officers and the continued policing of our communities. I do believe that there is a need for some sort of balance to keep our schools safe. But I don't think that resource officers, armed officers, being engaged in discipline in our schools is necessary. I think that should be left up to educators and educational professionals. Too many of our, especially Black boys, end up in the criminal justice system, and I don't think our education system should be exacerbating that. However, in light of the school shootings, I do support the idea of having armed security outside of our schools to keep our schools safe. But I do have concerns with how education has used resource officers in discipline. My school actually had security. We did not use local police for that reason, because we were dealing with dropout prevention students, many students who actually had interfaced with the criminal justice system, and we did not want to continue that pattern of having them in our schools, because ultimately what I felt was, we exacerbated and continued, if we were to have resource officers in our schools, the school to prison pipeline. And I think that it's our responsibility to fight against that. And there are different ways to handle our students versus having armed police officers engaged in discipline.
Okay, and James has the next question. And James, I'll call on you in just a second. For those of you that joined late, I did want to let you know that the other candidate was invited, but he had a previous engagement, is what he said. He's actually hosting his own town hall. He's been doing them every day this week. So he is not here. He decided not to attend. Okay, James, if you'll unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
All right, great. I'm just glad to be a part of this conversation, number one, and I would like to thank Mr. Kemp for his total transparency throughout this whole thing. My daughter is well graduated from KIPP Collegiate, which was, put in a totally different environment and mindset of learning, which helped them grow just on so many different levels. We were just speaking about some other things in reference to the youth. Mr. Kemp, I want to know, do you think, or the thoughts of mentorships for our youth, especially the young Black men, in programs and things of that nature, the platforms that you may be able to offer or introduce to the community as well? So can you give me some insight on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. Mentorship changes lives. When I was a principal, we had a program and a partnership with a local organization, and we had these meetings called Man to Man. And I intentionally named them that because I wanted our young men to see themselves as men and to see themselves as being able to see eye to eye with other men. But what we did was bring others in to be mentors. And it truly, changed the game with our kids. Even though they had, examples in me and other educators, I was very intentional about who I hired in my school to make sure that our educators really mirrored the image of our students. But also it was really helpful to have outsiders come in and see the relationships that were being built with our students. And it helped to create a sense of community and also an extra layer of accountability. I do think that there is some responsibility that needs to be put on parents to really step up to the plate and be more engaged. But also I think that there's a responsibility in the community to step up and serve. People say even if it's just for an hour a week, it makes a difference in the lives, especially of Black boys. So I would love to do that. One thing that I talked about with legislators when I used to go work the ropes down at the Capitol as a government affairs professional, or that's a better way of saying lobbyist because it's such a negative thing. But one thing I talked about was there's not very many Black lobbyists down at the Capitol. And I would love to get more young men exposed to that, to see the other side. Yes, we have pages where kids can go in and, pass out information to our elected officials in the chamber, and that's great exposure. But we need to expose our kids to all different types of things. And one is being a lobbyist. There's a lot of money in that field. And also there's a lot of influence. And so I'm very big on mentorship. That's something that I did as an MPU chair, as an educator. I ensured that the next people behind me were well prepared to take over. And honestly, I think that there's a lack of that with our elected official right now. Wanting to hold on to power for so long and also believing that they are the ones that are responsible to choose their successor versus, really engage in the community and allowing that successor to come up from the ranks the natural way.
Thank you for that response. We have 2 questions in the chat. We'll ask those first and then we'll get to you next, Drew. Rashard?
Thank you so much. Now, this next question says, I seldom receive communication or notices from Roger Bruce. What will you do to better communicate with your constituents?
For one, I've been told I'm on social media too much, but I also believe that's a very effective tool. I use that in my last organization. In addition to newsletters and text message, we live in a technological age. And honestly, people aren't always reading super long newsletters. There are some that will, but I think you have to use different modes of communication and also being out in the community. I think that is so critically important. And, one thing that I've actually enjoyed doing is door knocking, going and knocking on people's doors. I've knocked on over 1,000 doors by now. But, in working with community associations, engaging with HOAs to come to their meetings and have conversations with them, and also hosting community members at the Capitol. That's one thing I did in my work as a government affairs professional. We had Charter School Day at the Capitol, in which I hounded our school leaders and our parents and our students to come down to the Capitol and engage with us, because it's so important not only to hear from them, but also for them to see the process and also to get people to come to committee hearing meetings. You all, a lot happens to a bill before it gets to that final product on the House floor. There's so much influence that happens in our committee meetings, and we need to hear from more people in our communities in those hearings. A lot of times what you're hearing from is lobbyists or from people that are paid to do this work, and they don't hear enough from our community. And I plan to be a legislator that bridges that gap, because I've seen the need for those types of testimonies and that type of engagement.
Okay, thank you for that response. Rashard, the next question in the chat, and then we'll go to Drew, and then we'll go back to the chat.
Thank you so much. Can you share your experience in the public policy making progress? And then also, have you worked in any capacity under the Gold Dome? How will you affect change in a state legislature with supermajority?
Yeah, so I've worked, as I shared, for multiple years as a government affairs professional on behalf of the public charter schools across the state. So it was my role to work behind the scenes with legislators. I'm going to spoil something for you all. A lot of the bills that are written are not always written by legislators. There are people behind the scenes working with them, helping them to craft legislation. And I was a part of that process, a part of the process of getting them information, research, to better inform them on the bills that they were reviewing, working with folks, preparing them for committee hearings, going to committee hearings, preparing folks for testimony. One thing that I felt to be critically important was not for me to testify at hearings, but to get constituents to do that. And so I worked with them to prepare them to testify. And also work the ropes. You know, when we say work in the ropes, if you haven't been down to the Capitol, there are literally velvet ropes in front of the Senate and in front of the House, in which you have to stand on one side and the legislator stands on the other. And there are pages that I mentioned, high school and middle school students, that you give them a note and they go and get the elected officials. And that's how you lobby and get them to support your bills. In order for me, working at a nonprofit, to speak to a specific bill number, you had to register as a lobbyist, otherwise it's illegal. And so I had to do that, and I had to call folks to the ropes to whip votes to get bills passed. In addition to that, I met with not only Democratic legislators, I met with Republican legislators, I met with Republican leadership in the House and the Senate, and leaders of each education committee, appropriations committees. So I've worked behind the scenes to literally get bills passed and get funding. As a result of my work, there was some bills that were passed. A lot of times what happens if you will get a bill passed, but there was no money allocated towards it. And so then the next year or the year after, you work to actually get those bills funded. And so as a result of our work, there was a charter school facilities grant passed, in which charter schools don't get funding for facilities like traditional public schools do. And so we got a bill passed to give a grant to them to help to offset the cost of having to take money that normally goes to the classroom to pay for facilities. And so that was an unfunded bill. And as a result of our work, we were able to get $40,000 per public charter school to support them in facilities costs, because they have to pay for rent, they have to pay for air conditioners and things out of their general budget that takes away from them educating kids. So I was involved in all of those processes. So I understand what it takes to put a bill together, to work across the aisle, to whip votes, to get support for what you're doing. And that will be critically important in a legislature in which there are super majorities, as you mentioned. And that's where relationships come in, and being able to negotiate, compromise, which I know sadly is a dirty word nowadays, but obviously we need to do that in order to get stuff done. And be willing to stand firm on your beliefs, but also find ways to work with people across the aisle on common interests.
Okay, the next question is going to come from Drew, and then we'll go back to the chat, and then we'll come back to you, Mike Edwards. So Drew, if you would, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Mr. Kemp. Thanks for meeting with us here. I have a question specifically about voting rights and Georgia's recent legislative attacks on our voting rights. And you can feel free to think creatively and, just project something really hopeful and outlandish if you must. But do you see in the legislature a way forward to roll back the oppressive voting rights infringement that the legislature passed, House Bill 202, 531, these legislative attacks on voting rights? Do you see a way forward to restore and deepen enfranchisement among all of our communities in Georgia?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, it's going to be tough with the super majorities they have, but I do believe that one of the responsibilities for the next state representative, Representative Kemp, is to get out and work to get other Democrats elected. Obviously, this is a safe Democratic seat. There is no Republican challenger in November. So whoever wins this runoff is God forbid anything happening, going to be the next state representative in January. So I think it's incumbent on the person when I win to get out and work to get other Democrats elected. I think that is the responsibility for any Democrat in any safe seat. And honestly, I don't believe that our current leadership is going to do that. We don't see him out knocking on doors, engaging voters. And I think that's important for us to get other Democrats elected. That's how we grow our numbers to have more influence. One, we need to get rid of their supermajority. Two, we need to grow our numbers in the legislature to have more influence. But also, it's about getting more people out to vote. We need to get people out to vote and educate folks. I think it's important for folks like me to run, for our generation and younger generations to see that there's not this huge disconnect between our elected officials and the constituents. So I think it's important to engage and educate and go out and get people to show up to the polls. This is a primary race. This is a runoff. My goal is to get as many people out to vote as possible because that's how we change, our world. It's by getting out and voting. I do think it's important to call them out. I will be somebody, Drew, that will work with people. Sadly, we'll have to work with folks that, voted in favor of 202, but also I will be willing to call them out and stand up for our voting rights. I think of, folks like Senator, now Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who stood up and got arrested. I think of Park Cannon, who was bold enough to knock on the governor's door when they were passing that law. So I think it's important to have both. I think it's important to have somebody that's going to work across the aisle, but also stand up and fight and be willing to show up, when they are doing these horrendous things. But I do think hope is on the horizon, where we will be able to draw some of these things back. It may not happen in 2 years, maybe in 4, and hopefully maybe this year if we can get enough people elected. But I think that's how we change the trajectory of where things are with voting rights.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. Next, we're going to go to the chat for a couple of questions, and then we'll come back and get Mike Edwards, and then we'll get the mayor. Rashard?
So, Mike. So we have a new mayor. What will you do to work with him to ensure that our will for him is respected?
Thank you for that. I'm actually proud to have the mayor's endorsement. Mayor Khalid is somebody that is the people's mayor. I think of him, I just saw on the news the unfortunate thing that's happening at Camelot, and, commend him for being willing to go out and live amongst the people and try to bring change in the role that he has as the second mayor of South Fulton. And, I'm praying I get some of his good fortune. He unseated an incumbent. And I think that made a lot of people upset, honestly. And it's about bringing people to the table, getting people to work together and, engaging voters, going out and talking to voters. If you look on social media, you see all of this strife, like, you're either Team Mayor Khalid or your team council. There are people in our communities that just want our government to work. And that's what I hear when I go to doors. They could care less, personalities. They just want people to do right. And it's about getting people to be engaged and also engaging people in the charter process and things like that. That is my plan. That is how I plan to support Mayor Khalid, support the council, and ultimately it's supporting the voters and the constituents, because we have an opportunity to do something great in the city of South Fulton. And, it reminds me of my school. I was a Black-led school and I felt the responsibility. We have to get this right. And it's by us being above personalities. And I think that is critically important as to what's happening now.
Okay, thank you. And the next question we're going to take from you, Mike Edwards. So please take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask your question. Mike
Yes,
Edwards.
yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you?
Loud and
Can you-
clear.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Kemp, my question is, what is your take on SB 319? And do you have any plans in the future to reach across the aisles to your political constituents to address repealing SB 319?
Mr. Mike, can you give me some insight as to what 319 is?
That is the state bill that Brian Kemp passed, removing the necessity to have a concealed weapon carry permit in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, Mr. Mike, I actually went out to Douglas County when when the governor was signing that. The Douglas County Democrats actually had a counter event to speak out against he was signing that bill right down the street in Douglas County. Obviously, that is disastrous, is dangerous. As a result of the background checks, there were criminals, people with past criminal histories that were stopped from being able to get these permits. And now we see that taken away. I will fight tooth and nail to have common sense gun reforms. You see that happening right now. I just recently did a message about that, especially as an educator, seeing what's happening, people getting access to AR-15s when they're 18, or being able to, be in our communities and, conceal a gun, even if they have a criminal background. It's about, working and trying to get folks across the aisle to reason. I'm going to be totally transparent and say some of them aren't willing to reason, but it's about calling them out, as I said, being willing to, get in their face, not in a combative way, but really stand up for what we believe in and getting people out to vote. Like, we change things by voting, but also bringing awareness to our communities. Like, there are things that are happening that we are too quiet about. Like, we have kids that have been killed in a school. A little girl had to be smart enough to put blood on herself and play dead while a gunman was killing her classmates. Like, we should not be okay with this. Like, we need our community to speak up, get in their face, and make sure that they are not doing stuff like this. And honestly, it's about getting Stacey Abrams elected so that more bills like this aren't passed. That's how we affect change, honestly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Hey, let me take this gum out. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, out with the people.
I am out here for Troubles Vigil here on the east side. This is a follow-up to the question that Judah Mann had around voting and voting rights. We know that Black women have been holding us down in terms of voting. They have the highest voter turnout across all demographics. Unfortunately, Black men have the lowest voter turnout across all demographics. I was wondering if any of the lessons you learned being a principal of a dropout prevention high school, if they are fungible in terms of voting. Are there things that you learned about how to engage young Black men that we should be doing in terms of voting and voter engagement?
Yes, one is, thank you for that question, Mayor. One is not assuming that they don't care, they don't want to be involved. So when I was the principal of this dropout prevention high school, actually my most recent mailer has one of my students on it. And I remember specifically Miguel taking him to see Barack Obama when he was running for president. And the insight and excitement that they had being at a political rally and saying, man, Mr. Kemp, I have never done nothing like this. Nobody ever exposed me or took me. They didn't say exposed. They never took me to something like this. And, we have to stop assuming that, we don't want to be engaged. We have to engage them. I saw that you all, went door knocking, not for votes, but literally to engage Black men. We need to do more of that. I definitely want to be involved in stuff like that. And I think that's how we get Black men out, but it's also speaking to the issues that they care about. So one of the things that folks have not seen it that the mayor shared in his endorsement video is the story of my personal experience having to fight for custody for my son. One thing that I was shocked to learn, in Georgia, a father is not quote unquote legitimized unless he goes to court. That blew my mind. And it showed me that there are some laws that need to be changed to respect paternal rights. And I think it's by speaking to things that fathers care about, that Black men care about, that affect them, and engaging them is how we get them to show up to vote. Because a lot of times they're kind of overlooked because, like you said, it's Black women that are holding us down. But I think we have to speak to their issues. And so that's why I appreciate you sharing that and asking that question.
Okay, thank you for that response. We'll go back to the chat. Rashard?
Thank you. What do you perceive are to be the biggest failures of your opponent, Roger Bruce?
Well, honestly, one of the biggest failures is his vote against the public charter school bill. Had he had his way, students like my son, Jaden, like James's daughter, would not have been able to go to the schools that they went to. And schools like Resurgence Hall in Fulton County that was founded and led by a sister would not be in existence because of the incumbent having his way. And I think that shows to just being willing to work across the aisle and do what's right versus always just following the party line. I'm not somebody that's bought and paid for by anyone. I want to make sure I stress that, not bought and paid for by anyone. I am someone that stands on my morals, stands up for what I believe in, and is willing to do the right thing that I believe is the right thing, even if there are people that may be upset about it. And ultimately, I think that that's a huge failure. There are thousands of kids that are in quality schools and have access to schools in Georgia and, you know, many in our communities that are able to send their kids, and parents able to, you know, sleep at night because they know their kids being educated in the school that best fits them. And so had he had his way, that wouldn't happen. In addition to that, it's getting complacent. I feel like the incumbent is complacent and, you know, rests on the fact that he's been in there for years. And of course, if you've been there for years, you will end up on committees. But, you know, what has been on those committees delivered for our communities? You know, it's, you know, one thing to say, oh, I sit on the appropriations committee, but what have you actually got specifically as a result of your leadership appropriated to our communities? You know, I know he speaks to, you know, getting Fulton Industrial into the city of South Fulton, but beyond those things, what has he delivered for our communities? What bold ideas is he running on versus running on being an incumbent and being on these committees? It's time for us to have elected officials that are forward thinking versus, you know, thinking in the past and just resting on their past, you know, being elected or being in office for so many years. And community engagement. We have to be out in the communities with the people, engaging them throughout this process. And that's not what we have in our current representative.
Thank you. And we have about 7 questions in the chat. Rashard's going to go.
All right. So what are your 3 top legislative priorities and why?
So they've all been kind of discussed in this. You know, I spoke to the importance of voting rights just in my life. And, you know, the mayor asked the question, Drew as well. Voting rights are critically important. And, you know, Republicans see the threat that happens when we actually show up and vote. We have 2 Democratic senators representing the state of Georgia. We have President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris because we showed up and vote. We have the first Black female Supreme Court justice that's going to take a seat on the highest court in America because we showed up and voted. And so it's about protecting the right to vote. It's about fighting to expand access to voting rights. It's about, you know, ensuring that, you know, election officials at the state can't take over Fulton County Election Board because they are not happy with the turnout, the results of an election. And so it's critically important that we fight to protect the rights, the voting rights, but also expand it. You know, I believe that we should have same-day voter registration. We should have automatic voter registration. If, you know, as the next step, when you turn 18, you should automatically be registered to vote. So we need to be making it easier, not harder to vote. Next is healthcare. You know, I saw the executive aide of my opponent, you know, attack me saying, oh, you're saying that you're going to expand Medicare, Medicaid. I'm not saying that I can wave a magic wand and do that, but I am saying it's critically important to provide healthcare to thousands of Georgians. And we need that because it's a smart financial decision for the state. Republicans run on fiscal responsibility and all that stuff. Well, it's fiscally irresponsible not to expand Medicaid. And obviously it's important in our community because we need more people to have more access to quality healthcare, and we need access to a full service hospital south of I-20. So that speaks to the need for addressing inequity. The one thing that always has bothered me as being quote unquote the Atlanta way is that, oh, well, I-20 is just the great divide, you know, in terms of poor outcomes, look south of I-20. In terms of having access and the haves, look at north of I-20. We have to change that. And so I kind of drifted off, but I think that's critically important. And we have to be laser focused to address that and take bold steps to do that, and not just say that's not my responsibility, but speak out and fight and build coalitions and come up with solutions to bring a full service hospital south of I-20. And then finally, I've spoken on education. I believe that our public education system can change lives. It changed my life. I'm a product of public schools. We need to get more Black educators into the field, and we do that by, one, ensuring that they're supported, but also paying teachers what they're worth, and also, you know, adjusting our state laws to change the way that schools are funded. I believe that we need to have mental health experts in all of our schools, and we need to focus on equity versus the current model that we use for the QBE Act. So those are my three top priorities, and I look forward to getting to work on them as soon as I'm elected.
So much. Now, can you give us specifics on what you will do more than your opponent to put pressure on the Department of Transportation to better maintain state highways, such as Camp Creek Parkway?
Yes. So, you know, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I was watching the, was it yesterday? I believe it was yesterday. There was a meeting in the city of South Fulton to talk about the Old National Corridor. And I was struck that one of the representatives spoke to how she was working with and pressuring GDOT to get a diamond transportation pattern to her community. And so what struck me was that my opponent so often you know, when people, you know, call him out on things saying, well, that's not my responsibility. I'm not responsible for roadways. I'm not responsible for public safety. That's something that the locals are responsible for. I believe that that is showing that our community is wanting more from our elected officials. They want elected officials that are going to advocate for their best interests. And so I will be someone, because I understand the power and the sway that legislators can have in just making a phone call to a state agency. I saw that happen with our state education department when legislators would reach out when there was an issue. It made people work harder, make people work faster, make people prioritize. And that is the responsibility of an elected official. Beyond just passing laws, it's being an advocate. And that's exactly what I plan to do because these roads in our communities are too unsafe. We see too many accidents. We see feet dragging when we should have lights put up at different intersections. And I think it's the responsibility of our elected officials, whether it be representatives or senators, to pressure and work with GDOT to get these things done.
So much. What legacy would you like to leave as the next state representative for District 61?
Wow, that's a really good question. Well, first and foremost, it's a legacy to my kids to do the right thing and serve your community. I have an 18-year-old son, as I mentioned, that's going up to Tennessee State, and I'm sure one day I'm going to be working on his campaign. I have a 11-month-old daughter that's actually going to be won on Election Day, June 21st. And so what legacy I want to leave is that I worked hard and I fought for our community and I delivered results. That is something that I've carried with me in all of my leadership roles. I don't think it is enough just to be in a seat or to say you have a title or sit on some high power committee. It's your responsibility to be able to show results and say that was as a result of my advocacy. I am an advocate. That's all I've been about my whole life. And that's what I expect to be my legacy as a state representative.
Mhm. Now, can you explain to us what gerrymandering is?
Mm. Yes, gerrymandering is what we see happening live and well in Georgia. Gerrymandering is when the state legislature, every 10 years, as a result of the census, has to come up with new legislative and congressional maps to make sure that the representation is balanced. Well, it's supposed to be balanced. I am all for taking politics out of our process of changing our legislative lines as a result of the census. That is something that needs to happen. So I definitely support that, because what you see is people drawing lines to support their political interests. So for example, you had Congresswoman Karen Lynn Bordeaux and Congresswoman Lucy McBath drawn in their districts drawn in a way in which Lucy McBath's district was drawn in with Marjorie Taylor Greene or something like that. And so then she had to run in another legislative seat, in another congressional seat. And so they do this because they are trying to grow the Republican delegation at the US Capitol, or even protect their supermajority at the state Capitol. And so we have to fight against that. We have to fight for fair elections, and a part of that is to take politics out of the gerrymandering process and have it be an independent commission, or one that's done on strictly on data, because what we have is unfair representation. We have districts that are drawn to have, without question, to have Black districts, or to have safe Republican districts, safe Democratic districts, and it's all because of power. They want to hold on to power.
Thank you so much. What will you do to get a hospital south of I-20?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing I feel we need to change our certificate of need laws. That is actually a bipartisan effort that actually happened in the previous legislative session. So what I believe the certificate of need law has done is created a monopoly system within our healthcare system. For example, a hospital can say, well, I object to them expanding the number of beds or even building a hospital because that is going to negatively impact our business. In addition to that, I believe that we need to, because there are hospitals that get state funding to be teaching hospitals, we need to use that as leverage to build partnerships in which we say, okay, well, a Grady or even Atlanta Medical Center is one that actually gets state funding to say, well, we see a need. We know there's a need for emergency services south of I-20. Wellstar, in their well-crafted statement that the incumbent actually loves to share on social media and in emails, said, well, we looked at, the need in the community, and there's a need for preventative care. Well, duh, there's a need for community care everywhere, especially in our communities. Of course, I'm not saying that that is a negative thing, but also obviously there's a need for emergency cares. We have emergencies too, and that can mean life and death. Taking someone, a block versus taking them through traffic up to Grady. And so I definitely think it's important to put pressure on these, the hospital industry. I don't know, what ties the incumbent has to the hospital industry for him to say, well, that's not, my responsibility, or there's nothing I can do there. What you can do is advocate, and what you can do is get creative to find solutions and use leverage where leverage is possible. For example, with these hospitals getting state funding, obviously, if you get state funding, there's some influence that the legislature can have in trying to draft policy that addresses the issue.
You. One would like to know, will you support legislation that will help reduce the likelihood of mass shooting in our schools and the community?
Absolutely. I had the experience as a school principal. We had to do lockdown drills. And when I was a principal, this is kind of like when they were starting. And it's to, warn the kids and the teachers if there's an intruder or someone with a gun, or if there's like an active emergency, like an active shooter going on. And it's crazy to me that we literally had to learn and educate our kids what a code word would be. Like, for example, if somebody came in and they were seen with a gun, there was a code word that our students knew, that they knew you do not share this with anyone outside the school. And, you know, I would get on the intercom and say, teachers were out of chalk. Well, this was a time when, you know, we had whiteboards. So I guess that probably wasn't the most clever code word, because it's like, okay, why are y'all saying that? But, you know, it was an alert to our school to lock down without having to say, you know, lock down, to give somebody a heads up that, you know, they take somebody out now because they're very locked down. And so I am 100% for one. Yeah, I think that there are ways that we can make our schools safer, you know, to make sure that, you know, all schools have automatic locking doors, to make sure that there are policies in place to make sure that, you know, people aren't, you know, leaving doors propped open or things like that. I know some of that has been addressed with, you know, the shooting in Texas, but also we cannot hide the fact that guns are an issue. We can't keep blaming it on mental illness. The shooting in New York wasn't because of mental illness, it was because of racism. And we can't keep allowing people to have access to guns that, you know, kill multiple people in such a short time frame. There's no need for AR-15s in our communities. I'm all for an assault weapons ban. I'm all for more common sense gun reforms. And gun owners are for that too. And so it's about fighting for those, you know, gun reforms, and also making sure that our schools are safe. I think those are two critically important things, given what's happening on a more regular basis with these school shootings.
You. Now, where do you stand on the exclusive use of waste and trash services here in the city of South Fulton?
So, you know, I honestly have to better understand the issues with waste and trash in the city of South Fulton. I may make some people mad and say that because I am in the city of Atlanta, the city of Atlanta actually handles our trash and sewage. So I don't have that problem. So that's something that I would need to learn more about to speak to that issue.
Great, thank you. Now, we received a private message. Has your campaign authorized any text messages that went out to voters today?
That's a really good question. We did have one message go out, and actually I spoke to that message. There's a video of me speaking about school shootings and the need to speak on gun reform. And the misinformation that the incumbent in this race always seems to say that, you know, I should be running for school board or something. And, you know, I speak to the fact that we're smarter than that. The fact that education policy is set at the state level, and also that education is the #1 line item in our state budget. So I think it's important that we actually have educators down at the Capitol crafting policy and recognizing that any profession, your first educator, your first trainer was your educator. And so you would not be in any profession without a teacher. And teaching and principal and leading the school come with some inherent skills that I think are vitally important down at the Capitol. That's working with people that are different than you, finding creative solutions, and also being passionate about what you believe in. So that is the text message that was sent out. I am also aware that there is another message that was sent out that was not sent out by me. I want to be very clear on this. I am happily married. I have a beautiful family. My husband, Ken, is a great father to our children, Jaden and Brooklyn. He is a school social worker who has been supporting me hand and foot throughout this race. But I did not send a message out today that went out to people. That was done, and we're going to call a spade in a homophobic attempt. That was an attempt to suppress votes and to try to make it seem like it came out from me. And it's sad that that's happening in a Democratic primary. And I'm actually calling on the incumbent to stand up against those types of tactics and to speak out. It is Pride Month. I did not send that message out. We know exactly what that message was sent out and the intent behind that, and it's sick and disgusting.
Thank you for addressing that. what do you feel are the main environmental issues that we have in our district?
I'm glad you asked that question. So if you ride from Camp Creek and go all the way up Thornton Road into Douglas County, you see the exacerbation of warehouses in our community. The Black community has higher rates of asthma, higher rates of the impact of our environment on our health. And so I believe that we have to work together, local, state leaders, to end this growth of warehouses in our communities that are not only unsafe in terms of all the truck traffic that happens, but one, because those jobs, we need more higher paying jobs in our communities, but also because of the health impact that it has on our environment. And whether it be from the waste from trucks or from the facilities that are being built, we need to put our health ahead of economic developments that are benefiting people that aren't even here in our state or in our community.
Okay, well, go ahead.
No, you have it.
Thank you. Well, Candidate Kemp, I wanted to just follow up on that earlier question and response about the text message.
Yes.
From my understanding, that's actually identity theft. So I was wondering, do you plan to file a police report?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out what we're doing about that. And so for those that don't know what that text message done, and this is how you know it wasn't for me, because I'm much more, my text messages and my campaign, and this is not to toot my horn, but I am very, I take image very seriously. I take execution very seriously. That was a horrible hack job in which they must have went on Facebook and they screenshot it. I actually taken what's a beautiful moment. This was from my wedding day and I think from my anniversary. They screenshotted my post and included that in the message. I can assure you, if I were ever to send out something, it's going to be clean, it's going to be professional, and it's not going to look like that. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we handle that. I definitely am going to speak up against this and about this, as I've done on this forum. And I'm also going to expect our current representative, the incumbent, to speak out against this disgusting attempt to sow division in a Democratic primary when it's unnecessary. It just shows to me that someone feels threatened by my presence and by where I sit and maybe my ideas or the possibility of me being elected. But we will be addressing this. And, I just want to, this literally, I was made aware of this like 20 minutes before this town hall, but I just want to take some time to talk it over with my husband and my family and also my advisors before we decide exactly what we do next.
Okay, thank you for that response. And the floor is still open, everyone. And while we're waiting, Candidate Kemp, do you have any hard stops that we need to know about? Or are you here until you're finished answering questions?
I'm here until you need me.
Okay, all right, Rashard, you have the.
All right, so earlier today on social media, someone made a comment and said a movement should take place to ban the word incumbent from the ballot. If you are not known for the work that you have done, you should not get votes simply because you currently occupy the seat. Do you have any thoughts or comments on this?
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually support, Georgia is one of a few states that actually allow the word incumbent to be placed next to someone's name. I do think it gives an unfair advantage. Someone should be expected to run on their record. And I think that, in terms of, voter engagement and education, it should be the responsibility of the incumbent and anybody in the race to run on their platform and run on what they've contributed, their experience, and not be able to just, rely on the word incumbent being placed next to their name.
So much back to you, Ron.
Okay, thank you. The floor is still open, and while you have your candidate on the phone, and I see we have this, or on the Zoom meeting, I should say. So Monique McCoy, you're next to ask the question, so please take yourself off mute and go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Again, this is Monique McCoy. I do have a question for Mr. Kemp. Please excuse my granddaughter in the background. But I do want to also express my wholehearted and full-throated support for Mr. Kemp to be our state representative for House District 61. My question relates to term limits. I wanted to know your thoughts on term limits, Mr. Kemp. And I apologize for my grandbaby in the background. Please just share your thoughts on term limits.
No, that's all good. And thank you so much for your support, Monique. One thing that always struck me was Monique did have the privilege of saying she was the only grandmother in the race. So it's pretty cool to actually hear your granddaughter in the background. I do support term limits. I believe that we need term limits even at the Supreme Court. I don't know what the right number is, but I do believe that it's important to pass the torch on to future leaders. I do think that people get complacent. People will tend to relax on the support. For example, with the incumbent of lobbyists or attorney groups and things like that, versus raising money by and with the people. And I think that changes our politics. So I think that if we did have term limits, that will reduce some of the negative impacts that the political world has on true policymaking and leadership.
Okay, I have another, well, I'm sorry, we have another question from Drew. Go ahead, Drew. Take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. Well, my next question for you, if we could circle back to environment and sustainability. For a long time, a lot of us who know anything about Georgia Power and the Southern Company know how they operate and how they do so, not just in Georgia, but around the South and even outside the region. They are one of the net users of dirty coal plants. They also, do other fossil fuel focused energy production, and they're known for their ratepayer gouging. We have the ongoing issue of the nuclear plant that they still haven't made significant headway on, despite all of the money that ratepayers have paid in. So that's kind of a roundabout way to ask you what energy policy you might bring to the state of Georgia in the legislature.
Yeah, Drew, one of the reasons they're able to do that is because they have high-powered lobbyists down at the Capitol that have, politicians, that, support whatever they want in terms of legislation and not willing to hold them accountable. I definitely fully support the Green New Deal. I believe that we have to be transformative in the way that we power our homes, our automobiles, and the way that, the impact that it has on our environment now and in the future. So I'm fully supportive of that. I definitely think that we need to hold, companies such as Georgia Power accountable and expect that they will, do what is right in our communities. I definitely think that we need to move to more, safer environmental forms of energy, whether it be solar or wind. And I think that that is critically important to move us away from those fossil fuels like coal and also nuclear energy. That is, definitely something I'm super passionate about. I'm an electric vehicle car owner, and I was one of the ones that was super excited to be able to do that because of the contribution that I feel like I'm making to the environment by not using gas that's putting pollutants into our community. And also I'm saving a lot of money right now because gas is crazy. So that's, where I stand on the environment.
Okay, next question is from Ms. Gilliard. Thank you for joining us, and please take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I was late coming. I'm sorry for being late. I was in a meditation class and fell asleep, and I just woke up, but I really, really needed that. But anyway, first of all, I want you to know that I'm sorry that I'm not in your district. I would love to be able to vote for you. If I were in your district, I would vote for you. I know that we definitely need a change. And so I want you to tell everyone, and you probably been asked this before, but what are you bringing to the table that definitely is much different than what we have experienced for the last too many years?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councilwoman Gilliard. And shoot, we all need to be in that meditation class with you. That sounds nice. Shoot, I definitely need that right about now for the day I'm having.
Right.
But you know, I think what I am bringing to the table is a different way of leading. I think today's a perfect example. I am not into the dirty politics. I'm not into the politics of crafting legislation that is going to negatively impact political foes or show favor to my friends. That's not me. I am someone that stands on principle. I don't say this to toot my own horn, but I am like so concerned about the legacy, one, that I leave my kids, and two, that I show my great grandmother that all of her sacrifice in raising her great grandchild was worth it. And I don't think I do that by doing anything that's untoward, like sending out a text message that in a negative, a heinous, attempt, or to, pass legislation because it's going to suit my friend, or to say, you know what, I don't want to, support any other changes because folks that are supporting me are in favor of it. I'm somebody that is going to come in and work with people, even if they endorsed my opponent or supported my opponent, because I know it's at the end of the day about creating a better place and environment for our children and for us, and our communities only benefit when we work together and we stand on policy. And honestly, I think my background as an educator brings a unique perspective, somebody that has seen the impacts that education can have on our lives, and also had to work and educate kids from different backgrounds and different abilities. That same type of experience can be taken to the Capitol to work with people from different backgrounds and different beliefs, but also trying to find the areas of commonality. I have Barack Obama right here next to me. Was perfect? No, but I do think that there are a lot of things that kind of I see in myself in him, and also right above him, you'll see James Baldwin. I think I'm a perfect mix of both of them because they both, were leaders in, different styles, but they were impactful. They were, James Baldwin being bold and being willing to call out and, stand on the truth and speak truth to power. And Barack Obama in, being a community organizer. That's something that I've done in my work. And so I think I bring that to the table. And, I think it's time for that type of leadership and not this negative, infighting that happens. And I think that just continues if we continue down the path of, what we've been doing.
Thank you so very much. And to close out, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I really wish I had a lot of money, because I know it takes a lot of money to run a race like that. I really don't have that, but any way I can help, let me know, because I really know that we need a big change.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I just need to know where that meditation class is. Maybe that's the first start. I think we all need that. Maybe you can share that now.
Well, I will let you know, because the next one is July 14th.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, they're monthly classes.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I may join you as well. Thank you for that response. Candidate Kemp, I would like your candid thoughts on why your opponent isn't here. I know that he had previously planned to have town halls of his own But for him not to show up to talk to you and the people at the same time is a little disconcerting to me. I wanted to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's very concerning, especially considering that you all hosted a town hall, which I believe, and I'm sure Monique would say the same, was very fair. It allowed us to hear and engage from the community. It's one thing to have a town hall with your supporters. It's another thing to stand honestly in the fire. I don't know what people are going to ask, to stand and be transparent and to answer questions for the voters. I think it's safe, I guess, if you want to continue and have a town hall. If you've had one every day, what is wrong with not holding one? Tell your supporters to join you here. But instead, we have an empty chair. We have a box that doesn't say Roger Bruce because he decided not to show up. And so I think that's the first challenge of any elected official, of any candidate, is to show up and be willing to answer questions, to take tough questions, and answer questions, and also be honest and transparent when you don't know the answer. I had to do that tonight. I had to answer tough questions, uncomfortable questions, but it's showing up is what's important. And I think that's what our community wants and needs. And it's disappointing. And also, I think he should not earn anybody's vote because of that. I may be a little biased, but I think it speaks to character and speaks to availability, and it speaks to being willing to engage the community.
Well, thank you. And I agree with those comments as well. I think he should be here. Okay, the floor is still open. And there's Richard. You have the floor, Richard.
So much. Do you have any events that are coming up where members of the community or even your voters will be able to meet you in person?
Yes, very good question. So actually on Saturday, we are having a meet and greet. I'm going to ask, I think my husband's on here. Oh, yeah, he is. I'm going to ask if he maybe can put that in the chat. We're having a meet and greet over on Enon Road on Saturday. In addition to that, we are having a fundraiser at Blaze Steakhouse on Wednesday the 15th. Even though it's a fundraiser, don't let that discourage you. We actually are having, the fundraiser there, but we want it to be a meet and greet also. So please come out to that. I'll make sure that we get that in the chat as well. That's next Wednesday from 4 to 6 at Blaze Steakhouse over on Cascade.
Okay, that's great. And since you were so gracious and showed up tonight, unlike your opponent, I'll talk to our board and see if we can host another town hall for you if you would like to have one, where we'll invite your opponent again prior to the election. We know that early voting starts next week, so probably not that week, but one day or a couple days before, if we can do so before the election. So just keep that in mind, and we'll work with you on the best date for that. Yeah, so there's one more slight comment or question. Sorry to cut you off. Comment/question in the chat, Richard.
Yeah, so someone asked about reparations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm totally for reparations. Actually, interestingly enough, my son, who goes to a charter school, was saying, "Dad, anything with reparations needs to include Black people being able to start their own schools." And I definitely think that our communities deserve reparations for the harm and oppression and the false start that our community was given because of slavery and racism. I'm also realistic. I know that the incumbent loves to run on reparations. I'm realistic about where we are and that it is not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but it's definitely something I stand for and will fight for. But I'm also realistic that there are things that we can do here and now that will positively impact our community today. And I want to fight for those, but also, of course, fight for reparations and make sure that that is a part of the conversation, but not make that my only platform issue, because I'm also a realist.
Excellent, thank you. I have a related question. Since you're a former principal, as well as our candidate for a state representative, I was wondering what your thoughts are on critical race theory.
Really good question. One, the first thing is critical race theory, as we all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, is not taught at the high school, elementary, or middle school level. But I do believe that critical race theory is an important part of our collegiate educational curricula for the appropriate ages, because I do know for certain that there is systematic issues as a result of race that have impacted our community. And I think it's even more important to kind of reframe that to address what is happening down at the Gold Dome right now. You have a bill that was passed to limit what a teacher can teach because concerned that it may make white students feel inferior or feel bad. If you're teaching the honest truth, it will impact everyone differently. You know, I flip that and say, what about the Black kids that learned about slavery and feel bad because their people were treated that way, or may feel inferior because that's how this country perceived their people? So I think it's all about teaching an honest history. And I believe that our society is better when we do teach our children an honest history, and when white students do understand the impact that slavery and Jim Crow had on Black communities, because it creates more empathetic and understanding communities, because at the end of the day, we're all going to have to live, work, and play together. And so I think it's important that we are honest in what we teach our kids in elementary, middle, and high school.
Thank you for that.
All right, Mr. Kemp, as we wrap up, is there anything that you saw on social media that you would like to address, or any rumors you want to quell, or anything that needs to be addressed that you may have saw on social media?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that question. That's a really good question, especially in light of that crazy text message that was sent today. One thing I do want to address, I've heard this quite often that, folks, because of other people running, have tried to say, oh, there's this puppeteer, or there is someone that is, I'm running because someone chose me to be in this race. I want to emphatically say to everyone on this call, the decision for me to run was a decision amongst my family. I had this conversation with my husband, with my kid, Jaden. Well, I was going to say kid, so that sounds weird. With my son, and that's when we made the decision to run. I did not meet, and this is no knock to him, I'm so honored to have his endorsement. I didn't meet Mayor Khalid until months into this race. We had a conversation in which I reached out to him, just like I did to council members on the South Fulton Council. And, they told me they endorsed Roger Bruce. That's how I met people, by reaching out to them. Ultimately, I think it's important for me to have the support of voters. I can say I'm nobody's puppet. There is an individual that for some reason just wants to keep coming at me. I can assure you I'm nobody's puppet. I am my own individual. I am in this race for the reasons that I shared with Councilwoman Gilliard, that I shared with Whitney. That's why I decided to run. And that's ultimately why I am asking for your vote. And I'm only asking for your vote if you believe in my vision and what I stand for. I'm not asking for your vote because I was endorsed by the mayor, or endorsed by Vote Pro Choice, or endorsed by Victory Fund. I'm asking for your vote because you believe in what I stand for and what you believe I can bring to this role. So that's why I'm running. Thank you for allowing me to dispel that. And also, I want to just make sure I address once again the question about education and choice. I have long believed, and I led a public charter school. I believe that the public charter school give an opportunity, especially in Black communities, to provide quality education options to our students. And charter schools do not take money away from traditional schools because charter schools are, just like traditional schools, public schools. They are just given the opportunity to be more flexible, and they're given the opportunity to be more flexible in how they educate, like, for example, to have a longer school day or to have a cultural based curriculum. They're able to do that because what they take on for that is a charter in which they say, if you do not meet these expectations, your school is going to be closed. Honestly, there are schools that have been failing our kids for decades that just remain to be open in perpetuity. And I think that is a disservice to our communities. And so I think that's the beauty in charter schools, so much so that Georgia has an operating system. Atlanta and Fulton County are charter school systems. And why? Because they've taken what has worked in charter schools, for example, making more decisions closer to the school level and applied it to school districts. So there's something to be said about what is happening in the public charter school system. Are they perfect? No. Are there people that do the wrong thing? Yes. That even happens in all sectors, even in traditional schools. Our responsibility as elected officials and legislators is to speak out against those, to write policy that hopes to alleviate some of that from happening again, but it's also to stand on things that work. And I believe that when done right, they can work. I'm not saying they're the panacea that's going to solve every issue, but they are a good tool in the toolbox. And so thank you for allowing me to address those couple of things.
Okay, and thank you, Candidate Kemp. And I wanted to ask you, would you like to make any closing remarks? Those sounded like some of your closing remarks, but any additional closing remarks that you have?
I just want to say, please visit my website, RashawnForGeorgia.com. It's in the chat. I just want to say thank you to Ron, thank you to Rashard, thank you to the South Fulton Coalition for putting this on. This is important. Keep doing these every election cycle. I mean, you guys even had state school superintendent candidates. Those are usually people that don't even, aren't included in town halls. Please keep doing that. Our community needs this. This is what voter engagement and education looks like in action. So thank you just so much for having me and actually continuing with this town hall, even though the incumbent said that there's another town hall that's more important than this. So thank you for having me. I look forward to earning your vote and your support, actually starting this Saturday in Fulton County and starting on Monday in Douglas County, and actually on Election Day, June 21st for the runoff. Just thank you again. Please reach out if you have any questions. If there's anything I did not answer, I'm an open book, willing to answer questions. And I just am appreciative to those of you who stayed on this long and who joined earlier today. So thank you all so much for having me. And I look forward to getting out and winning.
All right, thank you for those kind words. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending this meeting tonight. A recording of this town hall will be available on our website later tonight or tomorrow. Please consider joining the South Fulton Coalition, and you can visit us at southfultoncoalition.com. And a big thank you to our candidate, Mr. Rashawn Kemp. Thank you for taking time from your campaign to speak with us tonight. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure hearing from you, which allows us to get to know you, and we greatly appreciate that. And I'm sure there are other people like myself who want to go and watch the rest of the January 6th hearings that are going on right now on TV. I have it recorded, so I'm not going to miss much. Anyway, thank you again, and have a blessed evening, everyone. And remember, early voting starts on Monday, June 13th, and Election Day is Tuesday, June 21st. Please vote. Have a blessed evening, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.